Hello and welcome to Bulimia Sucks. I'm your host, Kate Hudson-Hall, and thank you so much for listening. Now, this is a platform for people to share relatable and uplifting and inspiring conversations based on bulimia, anorexia, and other eating disorders. We talk with people who are struggling now with their journey, their eating disorders journey, and sharing their personal stories and their difficulties they're having and how they're taking their steps forward in their recovery. And then also to people who have overcome an eating disorder, but also talking with professionals who work with people with an eating disorder. So it's a good variety of different people that we talk to. Now, as a therapist, I've created a free Bulimia Sucks course to help you get started on your recovery pathway. So if you would be interested in that, if you go to my website, katehudson-hall.com, and on the homepage, there's a sign up form so you can get started. And the other thing is that I've written a book on helping people with anxiety. So that has just been with the editor. So I've just got it back from the editor. So now I am going through the mountain of edits to try and get that ready. So that's quite a challenge, but that's an interesting challenge and also an exciting one. Now, our guest today, I'm very excited to tell you about our guest. Our guest is Marcelle Rose. Marcelle specialises in helping women beat binge eating, bulimia, emotional eating, and also yo-yo dieting, so they can make peace with their body and heal their relationships with food. For many women, this is a transformational experience, so they're able to reclaim back their life. Marcelle is a registered nutritionist and a health coach with specialist training in eating disorders. So we're very excited to talk to her. Marcelle works with her clients on a one-to-one basis, in addition to running her 21-day Undiet Your Mind course, designed to unlock your diet mindset, unlearn your old food patterns, and make new confident choices. Marcelle also loves supporting women with their food and body challenges within her free Facebook community called the Food Freedom Collective. So Marcelle is here today to talk to us about how she helps people with an eating disorder and what fantastic advice she can give us to help us on our journey. So welcome, Marcelle. It's fabulous that you can join us.
Thank you for having me.
Yay! Thank you so much. Now, let's dive straight in and tell us about the different ways and how you help people with an eating disorder, because I'm sure that all the different eating disorders, everybody's different as well. So there's a lot of different pathways about how you would address this.
Yes, absolutely. So obviously it does vary depending on what's going on for the individual particularly, but as a nutritionist, I think some people are quite surprised that it's not just about food.
Yes,
but we do start by trying to make things helpful in terms of their physiology. So in terms of bulimia and binge eating, for example, it's really important. Well, and restrictive eaters who are sort of under eating particularly, it's really important that they're regulating their blood sugar so that they but particularly for if they're likely to binge, that they feel satiated after their meals, they're not restricting. So we very much go back to the basics and start to get the balance in with the food, allow them to learn to try and get joy from their food, but get some balance in. So just trying to look at what they can do. So perhaps, making sure that they might not be eating 3 meals a day, for example. They might be skipping meals and thinking, well, I'm not hungry earlier on in the day.
Right.
So I'll just, I'll skip that meal, and then perhaps, I can go a bit longer. So I'll skip, not eat till later. And then you're much more likely to end up binging.
So Marcelle, so can I just interrupt you there? So for people that don't understand about their blood sugar levels and what that means if that drops really low, if they are, depriving themselves of food. So how does that affect the body? How does how would you explain that?
That's a great question, because actually it has so many different physiological effects on the body. So if you think about, if your blood, your blood sugar is low, you're going to feel very shaky. You're going to be to have low energy. It can affect all sorts of things, and the problem is that what one tends to do is then say, well, I need to get something that to eat something that's going to very quickly give me some energy. And when you've got this situation where you've got very low blood sugar, and then perhaps have a binge, and you eat perhaps more, foods that are higher in carbohydrates and sugars, then you are going to be spiking that blood sugar very high, and bringing in the insulin, releasing the insulin to get it down quickly. And then you're in that situation where you've got this kind of spike and then drop, and spike and drop. And that's when you can start to feel, you get the sugar cravings, the low energy, anxiety sometimes, problems with sleep as well. It can affect your sleep. So it really can have an impact on so many areas, really.
Right.
Whereas when you're eating to regulate your blood sugar, you're much more likely to feel that satiated. You're less likely to crave sort of the sugars and things, and more likely to eat in a balanced way. Now, obviously, that's not the only thing that's going on in terms of binge eating and bulimia in particular, but it's just one of the things that we try and work on to help stabilize things while we work on other things as well.
And the importance of that, I don't think we can stress enough how important it is that, even though it may not be so easy for many people, but to gradually start to eat even small amounts of food throughout the day, rather than just, right, okay, I'm just going to deprive myself completely.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
of those blood sugar levels.
Yeah, and it is, and I think what you said, you stressed that it is just starting somewhere, because it can feel very overwhelming for some people. I think to suddenly say, I wouldn't suddenly just say, right, I want you, it's very much a collaborative sort of work that we do, where we work on what could we bring in the morning, even though at the moment you don't necessarily feel hungry, but that's another thing we need to work on. There's sort of appetite signals and hunger and satiety signals, but actually what could we bring in that would help you feel satiated, that you would feel comfortable with to get started. And then it's very much a gradual but collaborative process where we work on moving forward and bringing more foods more variety into the diet in a balanced way.
So ideally, in a perfect world, what would you suggest to have for breakfast, lunch and dinner? So obviously it's going to be a combination of all sorts, but
yes,
yeah, I suppose it, like you say, it depends on the individual what they feel that they can eat at that time, but it's having something.
Yes.
But what would be something that would be something positive for people to start to try and to eat?
Well, it's really about thinking about trying to get a balance with some form of protein in there, ensuring that you're trying to get some fiber in there, so from veggies and other forms of fiber, some grains perhaps, or beans and lentils, not perhaps in the morning, but you know, later on in the day. But thinking about protein, thinking about fibre, thinking about the natural fats that so many people still are worried about, but they really help you to feel satiated. So
yes,
trying to
people don't know that, do they?
I think a lot of people don't. Yeah,
because they just think of it as, you know, as something that they would avoid at all costs, but it does help them to keep and feel fuller longer by having a very small amount, doesn't it?
Yeah, fuller longer. Food is more, you know, it's that sort of pleasurable aspect of food that's so important as well. I think that you know, they're getting this balance and variety, and but actually learning to find things that they actually really enjoy and find pleasure from, because that's important to feel satisfied. And then you're less likely to be looking elsewhere for things that are probably not so helpful.
Yeah.
So it's really around, so everyone's different, obviously, what works for them. But for example, a lot of people think of oats for breakfast. Some people like it, some people obviously don't. But you know, if you like porridge oats, it's about what else can you add into it as well to make it really delicious. Lots of nuts and seeds to give you that satiety factor as well. That's some protein in there, some natural fats, lots of lovely other nutrients in there, perhaps some lovely colourful berries or different fruits, some cinnamon, you know, whatever. Make it interesting and delicious, and it doesn't have to take a long time. You know, you can quickly chuck stuff in and it can be a very quick breakfast. Or you could do, for example, an overnight oats where you make it the night before in a jar and it's ready to go if you have to sort of run into work in the morning. So that, you know, those kind of things can work quite well. It's just thinking about really what can I add in that's going to help me feel better throughout the day and help prevent those sort of cravings from that physiological standpoint, really. Yeah.
And then how else would you advise? And so I suppose you go through the various different food types and then give some ideas and make a plan. So then how else would you help your client with an eating disorder?
Yes, so we do a lot of work around, as I mentioned before, understanding their appetite cues.
Yes, we're very good, aren't we, at burying those?
Yes, so that's something we, absolutely. With an eating disorder, it's something that, you know, I think for a lot of people, not just those with an eating disorder, we've learned to override them. So we do a lot of work around that. So, and what I find can be helpful is we work on an online journal where it's not really sort of in the sense of kind of diet mindset food journaling, where you're, you know, judging yourself on what you've eaten. It's very much, okay, you can put down food, but that's not the most important thing. It's really how hungry were you before you ate? How hungry are you after you ate? Are you still hungry? Do you, you know, have, and really start to look at a hunger scale and look at the nuances between feeling extremely hungry to over and uncomfortably full, so that my clients begin to kind of really tune into that. It takes time, but that focus and that awareness can really help them to sort of tune into that. And
absolutely, because I also teach the hunger scale, and it's such a good guide for so many people with all sorts of variety of different eating disorders to be able to, for them, you know, every time, you know, they get to that point, even if they have suppressed that feeling of being hunger, but say it was 1 o'clock lunchtime, it's like, okay, well, let's really tune in. So where would you be on that scale? And how, you know, so the way I do my scale is a scale from 0 to 10. So 10 is when you're completely full up, 0 when you're empty. I don't know how you do it. And then ideally it's eating when you're between 4, 5 and 6 on that hunger scale.
Yes.
So anything below, you obviously don't want to get below that, because that's a kind of a danger zone. And then anything above 7 or anything above 6, it's asking yourself, if you do end up eating, you know, I always call it the cookie question. So I know I'm not hungry for this food. So what feelings am I trying to change?
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely. What is it that, what else am I needing? And then focusing. And it's so much comes down to that sort of self-awareness, I think, really. So we do a lot of work on that in the journaling. So and thoughts that come up around food. Obviously, people that, you know, for some people, there's a lot of anxiety, as I'm sure you work with a lot, around certain foods. So we also look at, for example, for some people, you know, breaking down, understanding for them, almost like a traffic light system of what foods they're most anxious about, what are sort of the amber foods, what are the red foods, and what are the green foods, and then working through gradually to reintroduce them. And then they notice that actually there was a lot of anxiety before, but it's okay. And just sort of kind of just getting used to eating those foods again. And sometimes it's about the quantities of those foods as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's taking very small steps. I had a client this week that we were talking about her fearful foods. And she's at that point now where one of her fears was actually going to a coffee shop and having a muffin there. And so the plan, one of her goals this week was for her to go to the coffee shop with somebody that she felt safe with, and then actually ordering the muffin and then just maybe having a quarter of that muffin. So just beginning to break that pattern. Yes,
yeah. And it's amazing actually how, you know, often I say that to people, you know, after they've tried their sort of, sometimes whether it's peanut butter or chocolate or whatever, and it's like, and how was it, you know, how was it for you afterwards? What happened? And they go, actually it was fine, and I'm going to do it again. And it is those slow gradual steps, I think, that's so important.
Yeah. And so what else do you say to your clients, talking about, you know, people, particularly people with bulimia and anorexia, how well, it's like such a clever skill at the time to be able to avoid the feeling of being hungry, which I really don't know how I did that now. 15 years of having bulimia and anorexia, and now if I don't keep my blood sugars up, they're screaming at me going, right, we're going to make you shake, you've got to eat, you've got to eat. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got to eat, help.
Yes.
A sandwich. Yeah, so it's completely turned around. So what else do you, so with that, with the reducing and ignoring the feelings of being hungry, how else do you introduce that with your clients?
So we get them to think about it and notice it, and often write down on their journal, obviously their numbers on the scale, and just really talking about it and noticing around how they're feeling, so around the food. So I think it's important to also, particularly for someone who's more, you know, come from more anorexia, you know, the sort of anorexia type tendencies and behaviors, just ensuring they're putting in those regular meals at first, because they can't just rely on those hunger signals initially. So, you know, just noticing the changes. Once they become aware, notice the changes in how, as you said, you know, now you feel like you really notice, you know full well when you're hungry, and actually just because I find that a lot of my clients gradually, you know, it just comes gradually where they're like, you know, I'm realizing now that now I've started to put in my breakfast, I'm really feeling it. And of course they feel so much better at the end of the day. So I think it's just that sort of talking through as well what's gone on for them during that week, having an understanding of talking through their journal and understanding what's gone on, and perhaps if things haven't gone so well for them, for example, if they've had had a bit of a sort of a lapse or a blip or whatever, which I call a learning event with them, because it's very much, it's what can we learn from it? It's such useful information rather than let's beat ourselves up about it. Understand why, and then often they'll go back and say, well, yeah, I realized that I did skip my breakfast actually on those 2 days, and I did, and that led to that, later on in the day, or feeling like that. So I suppose relating it back to how they felt and symptoms, and throughout the days, it can be really helpful as well.
Yeah. And Marcelle, one thing I did want to ask you about, which I know is a big worry for many people in recovery, is the bloating.
Yes.
So what do you suggest? What ideas that would help them with that?
Yeah, this is a great question, because I find many of my clients, particularly those with bulimia, are really triggered by bloating. For some of those clients, they've had the gut problems first, and that's been contributed perhaps to the development of bulimia.
So what sort of gut problems?
So
even before?
Yes, so they might have had, IBS type symptoms. So we're talking about, obviously bloating, but also, changes in their stools, their bowels, how their bowels are working, gas, all of those kind of symptoms. And so sometimes they've had, I know, I'm thinking about a couple of recent clients who've had, started off having all these sort of bloating problems whenever they ate, and then they, it sort of made them feel that feeling of fatness.
Yes.
But what we do is we very much talk about their physiology with that, what's going on with your gut actually when you feel bloated. Let's talk about it. Very often there's perhaps an overgrowth of bacteria or something, proliferation of bacteria perhaps in the small intestine, which what happens is when we eat and they're fermenting their foods, the bacteria is sort of higher up where it's not really supposed to be, and it's fermenting the food and creating a lot of gas, which creates the bloating, in sort of basic terms. But talking about so that they kind of can visualize, actually, this is what's going on in my gut and that we need to work on. But this isn't about overeating. This is about feeling bloated because, there's stuff going on in my gut, and because of the bacteria and what they're doing and what they do naturally in the natural process.
And then what happens as they start to move forward in their recovery with that? The fermenting and the... Yeah,
so for some people, actually just changing, obviously, their eating behaviour and the way they're eating can really just help alleviate a lot of the gut symptoms.
Right.
I just remembered one young lady came to me, she came to me for her gut symptoms rather than her sort of history of disordered eating. And she'd been sort of trying to address the gut problems with many different people and been down lots of testing, done so many different things and never got anywhere. And actually one of the things that we did was, so we kind of worked the other way, because I do work with people who sort of come to me just for gut, but also a lot of people come because they've got both things going on, gut problems and disordered eating. Yeah. So, we just had a look at her sort of eating behavior, and she had been sort of binging for many years and had a very difficult relationship with food. And we really worked on eating mindfully, simple things like slowing down, eating more balanced, getting her blood sugars more regulated, and that was the key thing. That made a significant step forward in her, her feeling bloated, and obviously because that was quite triggering for her, so it was a kind of vicious circle.
Yeah.
So we did do a few other things as well, but that made the most significant difference, just changing the way she was eating. So so that can be really helpful. Sometimes it takes longer and there's more work, just depending on what's been going on with them, because obviously the disordered eating can have so many different impacts on your gut, and slowing everything down, especially if you've been restricting food, and you're just your digestive system sort of slows down and doesn't work as effectively, and then that makes everything feel uncomfortable. You get the bloating, you get the feeling full prematurely and all of that. So there's lots of things that it can take a bit of time to work through that.
And what about probiotics?
Probiotics can be really helpful, certainly in some situations. There's for most people that can be quite effective. For a lot of people, I should say, not most.
So probiotics is working with the building up the good bacteria in the gut, isn't it?
It's just helping to rebalance, because often one of the problems is that the gut can become basically you've got your microbiome, which is like, I like to think of it as your sort of garden in your gut, your ecosystem,
the flourishing garden,
the flourishing garden, the ecosystem. And like a garden, if you've had issues, for example, if you had antibiotics which you needed, but it kind of knocks out all of your bacteria, and there's quite a lot of space, it sort of leaves space. So I like to think of that's kind of like the weed killer in the garden. So you've got a lot of space, and then actually the ivy, for example, that will take hold because there's loads of space, and it will start sort of proliferating and growing. So in your gut, similar things can kind of happen for a number of reasons, stress and lots of different reasons why. And certain things can start to take hold, sort of opportunistic bacteria or yeasts can kind of take hold. So the balance becomes, out, basically. It becomes imbalance, and that's where you can get some symptoms and things there. So probiotics can be sometimes a helpful way to rebalance it. Now, depending on what's going on for them, some particular strains can be more effective than others, and it really depends. But if somebody has an overgrowth of bacteria, sometimes probiotics might, you might not get on so well with it.
What, an overgrowth of bad bacteria?
Well, just not necessarily even bad, because I think a lot of the, it could be some of the bacteria. Basically, when a lot of the bacteria that we have living in our gut, if it's all in good balance, it all works very well. But it's when something, one of those, particular, or a few of those particular strains become really proliferate and overgrow, and then they can start causing problems and symptoms. It's not that they are necessarily bad in themselves, it's just that they've become out of balance. So sometimes it can be helpful to get that back into balance. But
so one of the symptoms would be bloating then?
Possibly, yes, that could be a reason why. And sometimes things like digestive enzymes can be helpful, actually, just to help where they're, while you're working on the sort of mindful eating side and getting your digestive system really going again.
Oh, it's very, very interesting for us. Oh gosh. So Marcelle, so as much as I want to carry on talking to you, but we're running out of time. So tell us about how people can find you and what you're doing now, and how people can find you, basically.
Okay, so you can find me on Facebook at Marcelle Rose Nutrition, also on Instagram at Marcelle Rose Nutrition. And as you mentioned earlier, I have a free Facebook group called the Food Freedom Collective, which I really want to support people with, binge eating, just their relationship with food and their body. And I do live videos every week in there about a topic, answer questions, and general support. So
yes.
So do come and join me there. And just thinking what else. I also do have a free download as well, that I can send you the link to, which is called What the Diet Industry Doesn't Want You to Know. And that's sort of breaking down the dieting and weight loss myths.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love it. So you work majority of the time online?
Yes. So I work over Zoom and online with one-to-one clients as well. Yes.
Oh yeah, we need to find out more. Oh yes, we do. So, well, Marcelle, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me here and chatting to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for all the useful, powerful information, helpful information that you've given us here. I know that so many people will find it really helpful.
Yeah, great. Well, I hope if I can help in a small way, then that makes me happy. So that's great.
Yeah. So thank you, Marcelle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's all for today's episode of Bulimia Sucks. So thank you to everybody for listening. And before we go, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes so you never miss an episode. And let us know what you think of the show. And so show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to chatting with you in the next episode.